Hey guys, and welcome back to another Conan Exiles video. Today we are in the desert of the Exiled Lands on one of the small inlet rivers, building a Nemedian PvE River Fort. This build is mod free, so without further ado, let's get started. As you've probably already seen from the title, this is indeed a speed build, so as usual I'll be talking through the building and decoration process, alongside explaining my inspiration with this build and any difficulties I had whilst constructing it. This build was actually inspired by possibly one of the most random sources I've come across. There I was browsing the front page of Steam, and I saw this fairly new early access title called Timberborn, which, as far as I can tell, is a city building game where the world is full of beavers. No humans, no aliens, just beavers. I'm not a really huge city builder fan. I've played a bit of like City Skylines and SimCity back in the day, but for some reason I chose to click on it and it looked interesting. Amongst the screenshots and videos, I found the screenshot you can see on screen now, which pretty much inspired this entire build. I did say it was quite a random source. Obviously it's not going to be a direct recreation, but the symmetrical layout of this structure with the river running right through the middle pretty much gave me the idea for today's build straight away. Coming into the build, I wanted something similar to the inspiration image, so I used Nemedian foundations to build out a framework baseplate. This helped me to establish the darkwood footing of the build that will contrast really nicely against the Nemedian pieces, but it also helped a lot in planning out where the different walkways through the build would sit, planning out the bridges that would cross the river, and also kind of managing how the build will slowly rise in height from the front entrance to the tallest part of the structure towards the rear. I've included both the framework and the full blueprint on screen now, so you can kind of see the general shape I went for, along with a more precise foundation count if you would like to recreate this structure yourself. A build like this is something I've wanted to create for a while, but I've tried it here and there and it's never really came out too well. The hanging bridge pieces from Debaucheries of Decketo are some of my favourite bridge related options. I prefer them to really almost any other option, and I'm always looking for a reason to use them heavily in a build. I always get tempted to use them with Flotsam, but the builds I've attempted never really turn out too well, so I was really happy with this build and how it was coming together as I was building it. I chose to use Nemedian because it fits well with the inspiration image from Timberborn, but also I just love this material palette. I have been using it a lot lately, so I might take a break from Nemedian for a while after Season 1 of Settlers is finished, so I can diversify some of my future builds. I might even go back and revisit Arena, which is also one of my favourites. The purpose of this build is quite simple. When it comes to PvE or PvEC, it's the perfect place in my opinion to enjoy the survival aspects of the game without having to worry about troublesome raiders knocking at your gates with explosives, hence why you usually find some pretty large and honestly quite impressive bases in this game mode. With this build I wanted to design a 4-player PvE fort, a place to live, store your goods and a base of operations for a small clan. This build isn't really practical for PvP. It'd honestly be reasonably easy with a bit of time and some explosives to blow into the foundations and collapse most of the base from underneath, but PvE is much more forgiving and it's nice to be able to live in an attractive base that isn't just a honeycombed box. The actual construction of this build was quite simple. The foundations passed up plenty of stability to the buildings, and the ceilings I placed between the foundations were supported underneath with pillars, so even though this is a large build I had no stability issues. The only real issues were stylistic ones, working out exactly how and where to place certain buildings and at what heights to make sure that everything ran exactly how I envisioned it. I wanted the height to be sort of like a gradual build upwards, building in height and mass to the apex of the build, which turned out pretty well. Aside from working out the stylistic technicalities like those I just mentioned, this build is honestly deceptively simple. It did take a while to build just due to the sheer amount of items to place in all honesty, but a lot of the complexity of the design is due to the placement and overall structure of the fort. There's a lot of facade pieces like awnings and fences and buttresses that will add to that complexity, and of course the bridges that sit in the centre of the build play a lot into that as well. Having the bridges run into the centre, especially with the columns to support them, really helped to bring the build together I think, as having each side connected together helps to make this fort feel like a cohesive structure, rather than risking having two sides that look identical but feel disjointed. Another thing I really wanted to include here was a horizontal elevator. I've only used them a handful of times, and I did manage to do that in the tallest building right at the top. So taking the elevator across, as you'll see in the furnishing phase, provides a really nice view across the fort and the river. To be honest, the only really difficult part of this build for me was the decoration. I'm pretty out of practice when it comes to a modded decoration. I have been spoiled by the likes of Immerse RP and shiny stuff for far too long, though working on Settlers Season 1 without decoration mods has definitely helped in this aspect. The decoration itself took a good 4 or 5 hours, I'd say, much longer than the actual build, which probably only took an hour and a half, but in the end I think it was definitely worth it. The decoration is quite thorough, even in areas where there aren't many applicable decoration items like within some of the workshops. It still bothers me that the base game and DLC offerings don't include pre-stocked bookshelves. That is something I would love to see in the future, as honestly, some of the available shelving units and bookshelves, in my opinion, they just don't cut it, and honestly, some of them are really hard to place decorations onto due to the base game's clipping system. This gets much easier if you have less building placement restrictions, which of course I didn't have for this build, and other mods like Immerse RP, Shiny Stuff, Deco Unplaceables, they include pre-stocked bookshelves, which honestly, they look much better. I think I'm probably going to add pre-stocked bookshelves to my little wish list of things to see in future Conan DLCs. So I think that is about all I have to say for this build. As usual, I will let the construction phase run until completion, and then I'll be showing off the build in a cinematic fly-through style. I think that's the best way to show off the splendour and design of this build. I'm really happy with how this build came out, so I hope you all enjoy.